Okay, very good morning to all of you. So today we are going to continue with our mindfulness discussion up to the fourth level. Uh, if I summarize, we already finished the mindfulness meditations on the body and then the feelings. And the last time we were discussing about how to be mindful of mental states, thinking of the mind as a state machine where state transitions are being made through stimuli, and certain mental states we define, in fact 5 we defined, and higher states we will be defining today. Uh, so we started the fourth level last time, which is mindfulness meditation on mental objects. So I think you would have practiced already mindfulness meditations on mental states, uh, so that not only about the mental state of yourself, but awareness of mental state of others. Sometimes by facial expression, you will be able to judge the mental state, whether of someone else also, whether it will be a lustful mental state or hostile mental state likewise. Some clarification about a question I received is that when we say hostile mental state, it includes things like fear, things like sorrow. Remember what we thought of in the loving kindness meditation, where we were meditating to be fearless or sorrowless likewise. So all that is included in the hostile. Usually the word hostile may give you an impression that it's only the anger or hatred, but hostility in this meditation method includes fear, sorrow as well. Anything which you feel in such a way that it's not happiness, exactly the opposite of happiness. That part we call hostile mental state. So I wanted to clarify that point first. And also with practice, your own mental state and also the mental state of others, by inferential understanding, you can judge. Mostly by facial expressions, you will be able to judge mental states of the others with practice of this meditation. I'm sure you already have the ability to judge the mental state of others by facial expressions. It will purify, and you will already have some ability of judging your mental state. But with practice, the ability will purify and will become more intense. Okay? So that's about what we discussed last time. Out of the fourth level meditations, which we call mental object mindfulness, we selected to discuss hindrances, aggregates, and sense faculties only. Out of those hindrances and sense faculties, I will discuss more. Aggregates, I will introduce. Due to the lack of time, we will not do a complete meditation on aggregates, which knowledge I will try to give, but practice you can think of developing later, depending on time availability. Right? Okay. We will revise what we discussed about the sense faculties. This part we have already done. This is what we chose, sense faculties. This one. About the eye, we could discuss some details, but I will start over again and quickly revise our discussion about the eye as well again, right? By the way, you can ask questions related to your practice, so related to extra knowledge at any time by the chat or by voice. Today, our practical session will be after the first break. You would have seen the schedule. Our quiz will be in the last 15 minutes of the day, from 12 to 12:15. One more thing, on the quiz, today we will have questions related to what we covered today itself as well. Usually last time, the quiz was focused on the previous day's knowledge. Since our time is very limited, even today's discussion, the key points of today's discussion will also be there in the quiz. So I'm informing you early so that you can pay good attention and try to capture the ideas. If not clear, please question there itself so you can be more sure, because the quiz is coming at the end on those areas as well, on the areas we covered today as well. So don't forget to ask questions if you're not clear of anything, right? So the eye, what is the meditator's view of the eye? Remember, here the eye is treated as a mental object. What does that mean? Usually the eye is physical thing, isn't it? Eye is physical, made of physical muscles and all that. But here in the mindfulness meditations, the eye did not belong to the first level, the body. The body was considered sans the eye, ear, nose, tongue. So without them, the body was considered in the first level. And in this fourth level, eye is considered as a mental object because it is giving inputs to the mind. It's one of the senses. And so the mind will be sensing it as a mental object. So from the viewpoint of the mind, the eye is considered as a mental object rather than a physical object. Of course, there are physical parts there. But what is important for the meditator is the mental process created by or generated by or initiated by the eye. Therefore, it belongs to this category of mindfulness of a mental object. I think I shared a URL of a good video which shows the connection of the physical things like the eye, whatever the physical parts there, and how it is connected to the visual cortex of the brain. And that is very informative from the physical point of view. For the meditator, it is that mental process which is more important. Therefore, use that video as an extra knowledge. But our thinking here will be more simplified than what has been found by the doctors or the scientists, because our focus, our perspective is the mental process. Okay, we discussed about the area which we call the eye, where the external light will fall on the retina, and the various sensors here, like the rods, will be collecting color information, and that information collected is known as color form color form in meditation terms. Color form is not the color. Color, when you are a meditator, your color with respect to the mind, your color is the color perception, which is generated by the eye contact. How did we define the contact? When the consciousness is coupled to these two. Consciousness is coupled to these two. We named it as eye consciousness. And the combination of these three things, like the physical eye with the color form, coming in contact with the eye consciousness, these three we call the eye contact. So consciousness will be generated when certain threshold is exceeded in the color level or change is detected in the color level, consciousness will be appearing on the eye. Similarly, on the ear, when the sound level or special sound is detected, the mind will transfer the consciousness to take a sample of the sound from the ear. Same way, all five. And we define the eye contact as the eye plus the color form plus consciousness is the eye contact. Ear plus the sound form plus the ear contact will be, plus the ear consciousness will be the ear contact. Likewise, for all six senses, we can define a term called a contact. And that's just one moment of time where a sample of the input is taken to the mind. A color sample or a sound sample. Likewise, the moment a contact occurs, a sample is taken from that sensor. I might have already mentioned to you that the mind being a sequential machine, only one contact will happen at a time. One contact at a time. So although we define 6 contacts here, they occur one at a time, because the mind can take a sample from only one of them. So it's kind of multiplexing theory. All the theory you learned about the multiplexing sampling is applicable to these 6 senses. When it comes to the mind, it will be taking samples, of course in multiplex form, but not this round robin type. Depending on the interest of the mind, when the mind couples to the eye and takes one eye contact, if the interest is there to take another, it will couple to the eye again. It will couple to the eye third time, fourth time, likewise, rather than switching to another one. Sometimes if some other interest occur to the sound, then one sample from the eye, then the next sample might move to the ear. Therefore, it's not equally sampled. In the round robin fashion, it is sampled based on the craving generated by the mind. Okay, then an analogy for the contact is like striking a match. If you take a matchbox and there is a surface here, and there is this surface of the match, when those two touch, we know there is heat generated and light generated. Same way, this surface is similar to the physical eye or ear or nose, likewise, the sensor. And this is the color form or sound form or whatever the part which is coupled from outside. And this touching is like the contact. And the resulting things like heat and color, we are going to define what they are similar to in the next moment. Okay. So think of activating one sensor as striking a match. Right? Two things touch, and the consciousness appear, and the combination of the three things is the contact, which generates these things like heat, light, etc. In our case, it's similar to perceptions are generated, feelings are generated. So the analogy you can compare like that. Okay. So diagrammatically, if I try to show that, it's the eye plus color form plus eye consciousness generating in the mind. The eye contact is with the mind. Eye is contacted to the mind. That is what it means. Eye is contacted to the mind. So eye contact, which generates feeling. What kind of feeling do you get when light touches the eye? That physical touching point, do we have any particular feeling? Is it pleasant feeling there or unpleasant feeling? None of them. It's neither pleasant or unpleasant. It's neutral feeling always at that point, at the physical touching point. The body is not like that. When the body is touched by something else, it could be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Sukha, dukkha, or adukkama sukha in Sinhala, in Pali. But when light touches the eye, it's always upeksha, or the neutral feeling. But there is a color perception generated, which we also call visual perception or color perception. Based on the perception of what he is seeing, you will take the decisions and take the actions. Those decisions and actions are called volitions. The decisions or actions could be verbal, or it could be physical, or it could be mental. Three kinds of volitions could be there: verbal volitions, physical volitions, or mental volitions, based on the eye contact. So in general, these are the correct words I will give in the next slide. And once these decisions are implemented, then you will find your mental state might change due to these actions to a new mental state. So what will rise now? What will rise now is a new mental state. It could be any one of the five that we studied as mental states. A new mental state will arise with fetter. Fetter means some attachment. Okay? Based on the craving, some kind of attachment to that scenery. That scenery you are seeing, there will be fetter attached to that, which is a mental thing. Fetter is completely mental. It has nothing to do with the fetter is not there outside. Right? It's a mental factor inside the mind. Hope it's clear. The correct terminology is eye plus color form plus eye consciousness, eye contact, and then eye contact sensation. This is the correct terminology. ඇහි නිසා ඇහි හැපීම නිසා ඇති වෙන වේදනාව is known as eye contact sensations. You can use the word feeling here if you want, eye contact feeling or eye contact sensation. And then visual perception or color perception arising due to the contact, and then volitions based on that visual input. As I mentioned, volition could be one of the three volitions: physical volition or physical activity, verbal activity, or mental activity will be triggered by these volitions. Hope things are clear so far. I didn't receive any question yet. Okay, the ear. By now, I think it may be clear to you that this eye, let me go back to the eye again. The eye, being a sensor, it converts light information, it converts light energy to something else, isn't it? It's a converter. So, which gives the feeling to the mind that what you are seeing as the color, like green or red, is existing as it is out there in the scenery that you are seeing. It's a perception, but we know what is coming here is not actually a color, it's electromagnetic kind of a wave, some energy, and certain frequency is perceived as green. Certain frequency of the spectrum is perceived as blue. So that blue or green is not really out there. It's a mental thing. It's a mental thing, but certain ingredients which want to give you blue perception or green perception is out there in the electromagnetic wave. So try to understand it clearly, because the colors you are seeing are converted things. They are not present as they are in external objects. So it's the mind seeing the color, so which gives the perception to you that the color exists in that very same way outside. It does not exist in the very same way outside. It's existing in a different form, actually, in the form of light or electromagnetic wave, which is not really the color. It is not really the color you see. It is the color form that exists outside. But the mind will fool you in such a way. It has been fooling you all the time. Therefore, it has become normal now that to believe that the colors are really out there as you saw it. In fact, it's not. It's a color form or some ingredients to generate the color perception that is out there. Hope it is clear. That's the most important thing to grasp here. Same way, when we consider the ear, let's discuss the ear now. I will not be able to discuss all five. I will rush the other sensors little fast. But if you understood the eye, then it's very similar. Inside of the ear, if you watch the video about the ear, I think you already know more details about what is there. Then we know sound perception is not out there. What is out there is a kind of a longitudinal wave. It's not the sound that we hear. What is out there is the sound form, which is one ingredient needed to create the sound perception to the mind. So the auditory channel, if we expand, we know some physical matter out there in the form of compressions and extractions will arrive at the eardrum. And this is not the sound, actually. This is not the sound you hear. It's called the sound form. It's physical matter. But you know, then these malleus, incus, and these things, their operations are shown in that video that I shared. So I'm not going to explain all that. What we call the ear, the meditator, when you are a meditator, your ear is here. Ear is not there, it is defined here, where the ear consciousness can appear through the neural system. Right? When consciousness appears at this place, it's called the ear consciousness. So ear and the sound form will couple together, plus the consciousness will be called upon. When all these three are present at the same time, then we call it the ear contact. ear plus the sound plus ear consciousness, when simultaneously all three are present, we call it ear contact. Will generate ear contact sensations or feelings. It's also, because it's the ear, when a sound is touching that, you don't feel pleasure here. Pleasure could be there in the mind based on the sound you hear, but the contact, the physical touch is neutral always, neither pleasant nor unpleasant for the ear. Right? Then sound perception will be generated as the result of the contact, which is a mental factor, which is non-physical. Based on the perception, sound-related volitions will be generated by the mind. Again, sound-related volitions could be one of the three types. It could be a physical volition to drive your body muscles, or it could be a verbal volition to speak, or it could be mental volitions to think about the sound further. And when you think about the sound further, due to those volitions, your mental state will be undergoing a transition. A new mental state will arise with theta. Theta will be added by the mind, and new mental state may not be arising just due to one contact, one sound contact. It might the mind might refocus on the mind, become conscious of the ear again. Once again, multiple times, consciousness might appear on the ear multiple times, and after that only the mental state will evolve into the new state. So it's not just one contact here. It may be a sequence of multiple contacts on the ear needed to generate full mental state change. Okay, so sound form, ear, and sound consciousness. As a result, ear contact happens, ear contact sensations arise, sound perception arise, and sound-related volitions take place in the mind. Sound perception is what you have heard so far from your birth. From your birth up to now, you remember a lot of sounds, isn't it? You remember the sound of a crow, sound of the birds, sound of humans. They are all sound perceptions. They don't exist as they are, as you perceived out there. What exists out there is sound form, which is one of the ingredients, physical ingredients needed to generate the sound perception that you remember. But you can't remember the sound form, unfortunately. Sound form is, you're unable to remember. What you can remember is only the sound perception. So what the mind has remembered so far from your birth up to now are all sound perceptions, but not the sound form, not the sound form. In fact, the sound form cannot be seen also. Therefore, it's not easy to remember unless you meditate and get the full understanding of what happens, what really happens here. Okay. So we are fitted with sensors all over, isn't it? Mind, one sensor, the eyes, the ears, nose, the body. That sensor is fairly spread all over the body. But whereas the sensor at the nose is very concentrated to one place, tongue, again, fairly concentrated into a certain area of the tongue, we know, but it's also spread everywhere in the tongue in such a way that different portions of the tongue will sense a different taste. I think you know about the tongue, right? It has 5 key areas, 5 main areas that that decide the flavor. Well, one question So where is the mind actually? For a meditator, the mind is in the heart, resides in the heart, which runs on its own clock. It does not depend on the brain to run the heart. So in meditation terminology, the mind is located here. The brain is the physical interface to the world. Brain is the physical interface, just like the input-output processor of the mind. And also it has the memory part. Just like a PC design, if you consider there should be certain memory, there should be input-output processor, that processor should have a memory, all that is the brain. One more question, sir, can you tell the Pali term for sound perception? Perception in Pali is sanya, it's called sanya. Sound perception is called saddha sanya, saddha sanya. Then visual perceptions are called rupa sanya. Likewise, perception is sanya in Pali. Feeling or sensation is called vedana in Pali. Volitions are called sankara, or there is an alternative term to that. It's also known as chetana, also known as sanchetana. So chetana, sanchetana, or sankara are the Pali terms for the volitions. Sorry, I forgot to give you the Pali words, although I promised, isn't it? The Pali word for contact is known as sparsha. Then when the contact happens in the eye, it's called chakku sampassa. Contact happens in the ear, it's called sota sampassa, likewise. Okay, no more questions, so I will continue. So you can slowly, when you meditate using mindfulness meditations, you can slowly build up your own model of yourself, which is known as a meditation model of yourself for mindfulness. Later, the full model I will give you, but what we have discussed so far, I'll try to put into part of that model, subsection of the model. Finally, we will assemble all those to make the full model. We now know that the color form or visual form, those two words are interchangeable, visual form or color form, right? Comes in contact with the eye. Eye consciousness will be directed or initiated by the mind. So when eye consciousness, the eye and the color form together, it's the eye contact. The eye contact will generate these three things. It will generate the sensations, perceptions, and volitions. SPV, I will call it, sensations, perceptions, and volitions. Since this volition is based on the input, visual input, it's sometimes called visual volitions, or volitions based on the visual input. That's about the eye. Sound, I don't need to explain, it's very similar. So all the other, like nose, tongue, body, and the mind also. Mind gives mental inputs to the mind itself. So this is part of the model of yourself that you will slowly develop when you develop the mindfulness abilities through the meditation. Full model slowly we will build up as we discuss the other parts of the theory. Isn't it good to have a block diagram or kind of a model of yourself? Because you are part of the nature. This whole exercise of mindfulness is to understand the nature working within us. Although we try to separate ourselves from the nature, we know we are part of the nature, actually completely absorbed by the nature. Although our mind try to separate the person from the rest of the nature, that boundary will be slowly diminished or dismantled through the mindfulness meditations. So typical qualities of the nature present out there, you will notice they are present in here as well through when you do the meditations. Right? Okay, so this part of the model we will complete later. At this level, the meditation is here, sense faculty level meditation is when that sense faculty operates. That means the moment a sampling is done there, you become aware of that happening at that present moment as it is. So that is what we say mindfulness of the mental object called I. Then mindfulness on the ear means you become mindful exactly at the moment where an ear contact takes place. You try to perceive this process. Usually this is a bit difficult at the moment because the moment the ear contact happens, what has been our practice? Our practice has been to focus on the sound perception and then think of outside. Based on that sound perception, from where did that sound come? Who made the sound? And all kinds of questions are generated by the mind, and then we seek answers from outside. But in this particular meditation, we don't seek answers from outside. We just focus on how it is heard rather than what is heard. When we see something, we focus on how was it shown to me rather than what is shown. The moment when you focus on what is shown, then the mind will be generating theta and will be generating more volitions to go out and find more or go out and enjoy. But here, when you become mindful of that particular physical element, particular mental object, like eye or ear or nose, you become aware of the process happening there rather than what is shown or what is heard. So it's a complete change of focus for this meditation. After some time, you will find that focus is always there; it remains with you. Therefore, you understand two things when you hear something. You immediately understand how was it heard, and you also understand what is heard. So you will be able to understand two things at the same moment. After the break, we will do a meditation on, say, hearing, one of the sensors, to get some experience on that. The sensor at the nose, the third one. This is the sensor. Although we call this part the nose, for meditator, this is the nose. This part is actually not the nose, it's the body. This area is the body for the meditator. This is the area called the nose. This is where nose consciousness will be called upon. So what is coming from out here is not actually the smell, it is smell form. Smell form is some physical ingredients needed to generate smell perception to the mind. And then the nose here, smell form is in contact with the nose, but you will not get the perception unless nose perception appears there. So the mind will have to appear there in the form of, nose consciousness, in the form of nose consciousness, it should appear. And when all three are present at the same moment simultaneously, then it's the nose contact. From the nose contact, it will generate feelings, perceptions, and volitions, and theta. Nose contact sensations will come, smell perceptions will appear, smell related volitions will be driven after that. So once again, what you have remembered from birth to now are smell perceptions, not smell form. Smell form actually you don't remember. Smell form has to be converted to smell perceptions for the mind to perceive. So the converter is this sensor. Since you have a lot of knowledge about the sensors, you know every sensor converts the form. Same here. When you what you remembered as smell, what you remembered as pleasant smells, bad odor, and all that are smell perceptions. They are all perceptions. They are all personal. They are all individual. They are all within your mind. Therefore, they can be altered or modified, as I mentioned in the very first day. All perceptions can be modified. So smell will generate a new mental state. Suppose it's a very pleasing smell that you get, your mind will make the nose consciousness reappear multiple times to get that pleasant smell captured fully to the mind, and as a result, the mind will go into the mental state which is called the lustful state, okay, with the craving for that particular smell. And suppose the smell is a very bad odor, again the mind will go to a new mental state, which is the hostile mental state, to reject that. So if the smell is a nice one, it is driven to the lustful state. If the smell is a bad one, then the mental state is driven to a hostile state. If it is neither pleasant nor unpleasant smell, mental state could be one of the other three states out of the five. Okay? I think you already know what this is. It's fitted to you as one of the senses. Where? Right inside your mouth. And normally we call this area the tongue. The surface is what we see, surface of the tongue. It is not the tongue for a meditator. That surface is actually part of the body. Because if you touch that surface by a needle, for example, you will feel pain. It is unpleasant feeling, and the tongue never gives unpleasant feelings or pleasant feelings because the tongue is here. This is the sensor. So you have these grooves. The food should fall into the groove for you to sense. If the food is remaining right there on the top surface, you might feel it hot, cold, that kind of things you can feel because it's the body here. But unless the food comes into the groove and touches the sensor, you don't feel any flavor. So this is where the tongue is for the meditator. This is where the contact happens. Tongue contact happens. But for the tongue contact to happen, you need the tongue, that sensor. Tongue means the sensor there, plus taste form. Remember the taste, all the taste you have tasted so far? Okay. Although it looks many tastes, you have tasted only 5 different tastes, isn't it? And the combinations of those 5 you name by various other words. So taste form should drip down to this groove and come in contact with the tongue here. And at the same time, the mind should be driving the tongue consciousness to that place. Combination of these 3 is the tongue contact. Tongue contact happens in the mind because the tongue here is the mental object, remember? Then tongue contact sensation, which is always neutral again. tongue contact sensation is always neutral, neither pleasing nor displeasure. But when that particular flavor perception comes to the mind could be having a pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling. That's a different thing. That's a feeling of a mind. But the feeling at the touching point of the tongue is always neutral, remember? Then taste perception is generated. This is what you remember in your memory. And taste-related volitions, either physical or verbal or mental volitions will be the result. And when multiple of these volitions happen, it is strong enough to change the mental state of the mind. So this will become the stimuli to drive the mind to lustful or hostile or any of the other three mental states. Skin. Skin, you know where the sensor is. These are the sensory nerve ends. And these are everywhere in the body, not on the surface of the body, but even it's present in some inside parts. So this is the body sensor for meditator. When some pressure is there, it is known as the touch. The body consciousness should appear there. And it's very similar to the earlier ones. Body contact will occur. As a result, body contact sensation will arise. The touch perception will arise. Touch-related volitions will go through the mind, will be initiated by the mind. Then the mind itself is a sensor. What does it sense? What does the mind sense? It senses mental objects. So mind comes in contact with the mental object and mental consciousness appear. When these three appear simultaneously, it's called a mental contact. As a result of the mental contact, you will generate feelings or sensations. This could be this could be any of the three categories. What are the three categories? Pleasant feelings, pleasant sensation could be there, unpleasant sensation could be there, and neutral sensations could be there in the mind. But we now know that the eye, ear, nose, and the body, eye, ear, nose, not the body, eye, ear, nose, they are always giving neutral feelings at the touching point. But when those inputs, perceptions are passed into the mind, then pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral mental feelings can arise. Then mental object will be perceived. It's called MO perceptions or mental object perceptions. Then related mental object volitions can happen. There again, these volitions could be one of the three: physical, verbal, or mental. Physical, verbal, or mental. So when all other five senses are inactive, consider a moment where all other five senses are completely off or inactive. It is the mind sampling its own thoughts, mind sampling mental objects and generating these things. And this is happening much faster than those physical senses. Therefore, most of the time, what's happening is this activity, mental contact. And as a result of the mind thinking on its own thoughts, mind working on its own thoughts can trigger a new mental state, which could be one of the five. Or suppose you are thinking of a meditation mental object. The mental state can even change to a higher state, which we are going to discuss today, higher mental states. Right, that's all about the six sense faculties. after the break, we will do the meditation on the sense faculty. Your own sense faculties, you can get the direct insight. And about the other sense faculties, other people's sense faculties, it will be inferential understanding as we discussed earlier. Plus, contemplation stages will be closely examine arising and passing away of that activity. Stage 2 of the contemplation is, I'm sorry, this is stage 1 and 2 both here. Stage 2 is you become knowledgeable of why that particular sense faculty arose. Have a break here. After the break, I will take a few minutes to explain these courses. After that, we'll have the practical session. Again, when you log on with your index number for the practical session and switch on the camera to show. Since you are doing a meditation only in this area, you can show only the face if you would like to, right, for today's meditation. But if any of you would like to place the camera in such a way your full posture is exposed, it's okay. Right? Hope you have practiced the postures by now. There will be certain marks for that when we give the marks for the practicals. Right? So please keep on practicing the posture. Right? Okay, have the break. After the break, we'll meet again using the other link.